Hello, my name is Valerie, and today we'll be discussing why newspaper companies should switch to being fully digital. Where do you get your daily news from? Do you look at digital news such as news apps or the newspaper? I think we can all agree that it's not difficult to find the daily news, especially with the tools and technology that we have today. Digital media has assimilated in many of Generation Z's lives. These days, it seems that we can just open our social media apps and find out the weather forecast, politics in our country, as well as social issues. Many can argue that digital news outlets are not as reliable as older ways of receiving news, such as the newspaper, but it's in fact just as reliable, and if anything, it's more accessible. Newspapers could actually benefit from making their newspapers fully digital. Newspapers are being used less and less as technology grows. However, there are many critics who think that digital media is not as reliable, and a big change to receiving our news from newspapers. By educating these individuals, they will be able to understand that although digital media might be a different way to get the news, it's still the same reliable source for individuals to receive their information, and also a more accessible way to receive the information as well. There are many factors that come into play when discussing why digital media is reliable, as well as why it's been a more popular way to learn about our daily news. According to Pew Research, the newspaper industry has been on a decline since the mid-2000s. Those companies' online traffic has actually began to grow. Pew Research Center also states that physical weekly newspaper prints have decreased by 19% and Sunday prints have decreased by 14%. Forbes magazine discusses that during the pandemic, 1,800 newspaper companies have been shut down, as well as employees losing their jobs. Individuals, especially those in newer generations, are also not gravitating towards newspapers anymore, stated by Todd Housting on the article named Tech More Americans Now Get News from Social Media from Newspapers, says survey. All these various factors pertaining to newspaper versus digital media have solutions to them as well. Due to the decrease in the number of prints newspaper companies are suffering with, these companies' websites are actually gaining more traffic instead. This shows that individuals are actually preferring to read their news articles online rather than purchasing a paper version. If these newspaper articles were to open on various social media platforms, it could be one step for them to be able to adapt to the new generation's technology. Instead of shutting down their offices, they can shift their focus on online news articles where they can still be able to publish the same reliable news. If individuals aren't going towards newspapers, they're going towards digital news, such as news apps and television. This is more of a reason as to why newspapers have started to integrate into the digital news field, such as New York Times, CNN, etc. Imagine not having to go to your local store to receive important and urgent news. All you would have to do is open your local news app and not only get to see the weather forecast, but also political and social issues in our country. Individuals and newspaper companies will come to the conclusion that by making newspaper articles completely digital, newspaper companies won't have to suffer from such a decline in sales, resulting in them to have to shut down their companies and employees losing their jobs, while consumers will be able to receive their daily news information on their digital phone applications. If individuals and newspaper companies do not come to the conclusion that news should be all digital, then more newspaper companies will have to shut down, as well as employees losing their jobs, and the consumers will have to go to the store to purchase their daily newspapers rather than having to open their phone and see their daily news right at their fingertips. It would be nice to have your favorite news articles right on your phone without having to step outside of your home to purchase the newspaper. By making your favorite newspaper digital, you wouldn't have to. People should see that making newspapers fully digital will allow individuals to get the same reliable information they were getting from newspapers in a quicker and more accessible way, while also seeing that newspaper companies can benefit from making their newspapers digital as well. We're living in a decade where everything is done digitally, especially getting our news and information. Newspaper companies can help adapt to this change by making their newspapers completely digital rather than paper. By making news digital, readers will have to be able to get the same reliable information they'd get from the newspaper right at their fingertips, while newspaper companies don't have to go out of business because paper copies are just simply not selling. All around effective reasoning as to why these companies should switch to online news.